Do, 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 do. Hi, Eric.
Hey, so good to be back. How
Good
are
to be
you?
back. I am doing better. It goes up and down.
Since our last episode, it's been quite a wild ride for the world.
Yeah, the last time we talked, I was coming off of a lot of personal stuff. This time, we're coming off a lot of world stuff, and both suck in their own way. But
Yeah.
yeah, we keep on doing the podcast. Woo!
Yeah, of
The Mom and Eric
course.
podcast.
We
Yes.
have to.
Yes. I laughed my head off at your promo on Instagram.
Oh,
Family fun for the whole family or family.
yeah.
So anyway, today's episode 24. Welcome to the Mom and Eric podcast.
Sorry. To boldly go where no mom and their son has gone before.
So, yes. So, for our listeners, today we are talking about the movie Anora. And this is a movie that is still in the theaters, and we'll go through the plot summary in a little bit. But Eric posted a very funny promo, which he never does, of this episode saying,
Okay, I
our
used to.
next
I kept forgetting, but
Okay, our next episode is about Anora, family fun for everybody. And then he also texted me that he couldn't believe that I had picked this movie for this episode. So I did want to talk a little bit about why I picked this movie. Anora is about a stripper, and occasional sex worker. It is written and directed by Sean Baker, who has done other films about sex workers before. And it stars Mikey Madison, and it's about a stripper who falls in love and has madcap adventures with the son of a Russian oligarch. I think that's the term. I mean, I don't think they quite called him a Russian gangster. I think they called him a Russian oligarch. Although
hmm.
I feel like oligarch is synonymous these days with gangster, given how
What does that mean
oligarch
directly? Yeah.
oligarch means power that's concentrated in the hands of a few.
Oh,
So so dictator is one person, oligarch is like a very few people have the power concentrated.
oh,
So they refer to Russian oligarchs to refer to those multi-billionaires who rose to power after Putin took power, after communism fell, and now Russia is an oligarchy. So that's what it refers to.
awesome. That's great.
Yes. So the movie follows this stripper and sex worker, Anora. She refers to herself as Annie, and it shows her relationship with this incredibly immature son of a Russian oligarch, and their crazy whirlwind relationship and romance where he showers her with tons and tons and tons of expensive gifts, and then everything starts to fall apart when his parents actually learn of the marriage between them. They eventually get married in Las Vegas. But before we get into how we felt about the movie, I just want to talk a little bit about, in reference to your jokes about you can't believe I picked this movie. I really got the joke after I saw the movie because I don't think I knew what the movie was about before going into it, and I knew what the movie was about when I suggested it. And I suggested it for a number of reasons, by the way. So the number one, it's a movie that's gotten a lot of buzz. It's gotten a lot of buzz. And so actually Mikey Madison, the star who plays Annie, is mounting a major Oscar campaign. And so people don't, a lot of the pundits don't think that she's going to make it very far in her Oscar campaign because it's a movie about sex workers and it's got a lot of sex in it. And Academy voters don't usually go for something that gritty. But at the same time, um, I heard a lot about it, that it was a really, really good movie. Although Sarah, my favorite film critic, had an interesting take on it, and she liked it, but she also had a criticism of it, which I think is very valid. So we'll get into that later. But the other
Hmm.
reason I picked this one is because you and I have talked a lot about comfort watches in the past in this episode, and there are times when I have an urge to push myself out of a comfort zone. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
really?
yes, I do. I want to challenge
Well, this goes
myself.
for me too. Sorry. So, yeah.
Okay, see, yeah. So I felt like challenging myself a little bit and going a little bit out of the norm, but I didn't, from what I understood, the movie wasn't super violent or disturbing, you know? So um there's movies about you can see how a movie about sex workers and strippers could be really violent, really disturbing, lots of violence against women. And I
Hmm.
didn't get that feeling, I didn't get the vibe that this movie was going to be like that. So I thought that I could
Yeah.
stomach it but also challenge myself with a different kind of movie than something that would just make me feel good and soothe me, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was actually and I sort of felt that it was the right choice for that reason. Like it was just the right amount of challenging. Because I liked things about this movie a lot, and I thought that some things were problematic, you know, and so, but I actually ended up liking the movie more than I thought that I would. So anyway, so let's start. I already gave the plot synopsis. What did you think of the movie?
Yeah. I thought it was pretty good. I've not seen any of Sean Baker's movies before.
Me neither.
But I have heard that these are typically what his movies are about. I also There's a director in my class who made movies that some of my friends said was like this director.
Oh,
And
really?
now that I've seen Anora, like I totally see where that's coming from because his movies that I did see at school were super like were pretty ridiculous and like no not I mean there's a plot but not necessarily and it's more just like watching things unfold, watching these characters do these crazy things. Um so in that respect like I totally can see I saw that influence and also um potentially what the buzz around Sean Baker was.
Yeah,
I
you had a
still
classmate. You had a classmate who did he make movies about sex workers, or did he make movies that
no.
no just felt it similar in tone?
Yes, yeah.
Similar in tone.
Like
Okay.
one of his movies I mean both were about kind of like poor like middle class like characters who had very serious like character not character flaws but flaws as people
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that felt like they were exploited to make into a movie, so like stuff like that. It's like raunchy and um out there outside the box,
Yeah.
but also really funny, really really funny.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I got from Anora. I was like hysterically laughing at
Are
some
you
scenes. Like
serious?
I was dying. Kind of beautifully, it transitioned to a lot of scenes that were so somber or
Moving.
yeah, moving. Actually, I mean, I can't exactly say I was really that moved by the movie, but I will say I thought like the character arcs and the scenes were well done, well portrayed, and I could
Yeah.
totally see how it could be moving.
I felt it's you just that is exactly how I felt.
Yeah.
I felt
Um,
it's that's exactly that expresses exactly how I felt. I felt like I wasn't sure how moved I was, but
yeah.
I actually thought that it was an admirable attempt.
I think part of it is like, most typical movies will want you rooting for the character and want you like I want them to do this specific thing or they'll make you want something for the character, but then realize that they needed something else, stuff like that. It's not this movie to me didn't have that sort of sensation. It was more like I'm just watching this happen. I'm
Yeah.
just watching this happen in front of me. It's really, really captivating and it's like so intriguing, and I want to see how this ends. I'm just like it's not like, but I'm not like attached to them. But I think that
Yes.
it also could be because of just my place in society and also just who I am as a person, but like um I think it could definitely have something to do with the structure of the movie and all
Yeah.
that.
You know, on this thing about the lack of connection, because I felt it too. I didn't, you know, I was invested in what happened in the storyline, but I wasn't invested in the characters. And I think that I actually for me it came down to a question of relatability because nothing about the characters or the situation, nothing about it was relatable. Like nothing, like none of the decisions that they made or the circumstances that they were in or the lives that they lived nothing was relatable. And the only thing that was even the tiniest bit relatable was Annie's fierceness at fighting for herself. That sort of fierceness at what a warrior she was at, and standing up for herself. But
Yeah.
even then, I thought that even then, while I found that aspect of her to be likable, I also I also thought that she was incredibly naive and stupid to take it as far as she did. To even believe that this could come true, or to even believe that this whole sham could possibly be sustained. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah. I
But
mean,
that's
well,
it
to
came
that
down to a
point,
question of relatability. Yeah.
yeah, to that point, I think that makes sense. And I wouldn't say I related to the characters really, but I think it's because the characters were so fully realized. Like I think they were
Yes.
so real. So they were like it's very hard to see them as anything but just real people.
Yes. I
Especially
agree.
especially
Yes.
Anora because like watching interviews, I watched some interviews today and just watching her like talking it like a California accent, like and
Yeah.
not like the New York
The New York Bronx accent. You're like, oh my
yeah.
God. Yeah.
She was it shows not only her talent but also like just how realized that character was. So that's what made it more of like a spectator rather than and I think it's a matter of preference whether you latch on to movies that um are so like fully realized like that they can just display something so amazing or like do that but also like can um resonate with you in a different way. I think
Yeah.
that differs from person to person.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on this idea of the characters being fully realized, because that's, we usually start by talking about what we liked and disliked about the movie. And that is the thing that I liked the very, very most about the movie, is the fact that the characters were so beautifully realized, which, you just said is probably a matter of both writing and performance, and it's probably a whole combination of things. But I was thinking as the movie, probably a third of the way into the movie, I was thinking how easily these characters could have been two-dimensional and super caricature like, because you really had this like setup where you had, strippers and sex workers, and you had a boss at the stripper club, for example, and then you had
Yeah.
these Russian oligarch, like
Very
these.
pimp-esque guy,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you had this, situation where they have the fixers come and try to extricate and annul this marriage. And so in so many situations you can picture how two-dimensional those, like they could have been these like heavy guys, like these like super like violent, like flat, featureless people. But instead you get not just from Anora, who it is an amazing performance, in terms of how she plays it, but you also, every single one of those fixers was so human and also just so hilarious. Like, so
Yeah.
hilarious. I loved what a worrywart Toros was, the main Armenian priest. I just
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
how much he was worrying the whole time, and how he kept on inserting these like things, which I think is a matter of, again, script and performance,
Hmm.
But when after his brother vomits in the car, and he goes, "It still smells in here." He was like, "My wife is gonna drive this car
My
tomorrow."
our favorite I think I went to see this with Carrie and Brooke. I think our favorite from him was when he was in the diner and was like, "Oh, your generation is so lazy. You don't work, you don't do anything."
It was like Grandpa.
Such a typical old person thing to
Wasn't that
say.
like Grandpa?
Yeah, yeah, totally. But like that was hilarious, but also him puking was the scene I laughed at the most. Like
Yes.
not only that he puked in that moment, but it was like this like chunky milk like or something like what the fuck? You had no indication that he had anything that like resembled that before.
Yeah, but he was just like,
So
I don't feel
and
well.
it was
I don't
so
feel
much
well. I think I have a
and it was
concussion. I was
so
like,
much.
so
Oh,
all of them. Also, the thing is that Toros was so overcome with worry about how what his standing with the family was going to be and what trouble. He was so torn between his different obligations. He had to leave a baptism that he was
yeah,
officiating.
that was hilarious.
And then he had to leave,
Everybody's
and
like,
then
you're not supposed to do that. This is
and then
their baby's curse now.
and then he had to spend all of this time searching for this dumbass kid who he's tried to fix so many situations for. And then in between, he tries to be like, he tries to be reasonable and he tries to be a human being. So he says things like, he says things like, we're not, we're gonna, you deserve a green card fee. And then also when he tries to interrupt their family conference on the plane, and he's like, I just feel so grateful.
After the other guy just tried to say something like, "Hey, don't be stupid."
Yes.
Anyways, I'm really sorry, guys.
Yes. So everybody, especially the three fixers, was a fully realized character. And I actually super want to call out the performance of the guy who played Igor, because Igor was wonderful. And I kept on looking at him. My eye was drawn to him during all of the scenes, because I was looking for those reaction shots. Is that what they call them? Those reaction shots, where you would see him in the most subtle way. I mean, he's kind of a wooden guy. He's supposed to be a wooden guy who doesn't have a lot of emotions. He's
Yeah,
just trying to get his job done. And he was referred to by some derogatory term in Russian, which just really means like henchman. Like you're just like some dumb muscle guy. So
yeah,
she says this to him towards the end, and I looked it up. I looked up what the term meant. But anyway, but you could see his evolution where he felt this like sympathy and this tenderness for Annie's character, and that he really admired how much she was fighting for herself, how much she was advocating for herself. And at the end, actually, I thought his line delivery when she says, were you just trying to rape me? Are you just going to rape me? And then she goes, why not? And he goes, because I'm not a rapist. I thought that that was the most amazing line delivery. Like he just said it so matter of factly. He was like, because I'm not a rapist.
yeah.
And so I thought that his performance was extraordinary. I actually thought that if anybody should be doing an Oscar campaign, it should be him because I thought he was so, so good. But I thought that all of the fixers, all the actors who played the fixers were amazing, just incredible.
I was glad that they didn't take his route, in like this sort of white knight kind of like route. That was because that was what I was watching for. I knew that they were leading towards like,
Yeah.
oh well, he, is being kind to her. He's like the only one who's really a person, even though he does do that crazy shit, like wrangle her when she's, freaking out. Um, and I'm glad that it was very well addressed. Like it was the finale of the movie that felt so like because it ultimately like she was so resistant to him the entire time until he just displayed the most nice, the most kind thing ever, which is that he kept the ring or he stole the ring. Um and that kind of like
Broke her down.
broke her down completely. So in both like physically and mentally. So
Yeah.
I thought that that was really well done, and I feel like it could have ended a lot of different ways, but that was a good way to end it.
Yeah, there's a lot of commentary online. There's an interview with the actor who played Igor if in Vulture where they're pressing him about, well, what do you think? What happened after the
Dude, that's
ending?
what all the interviews want to know. Oh, were you guys in love? Oh,
I
fucking
know. Did you
shut
guys
up.
go off and get married? Did you have a relationship? Blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
and he said, and actually
Did you get married? That's a stupid fucking
I know,
question.
and Sean Baker said this too. He said that ending is entirely about your imagination to fill in. Like you're supposed to take your own reading of what happened to the characters after that. You're supposed to fill it in. And I actually think it did a really, really good job of that. So, the TV show The Sopranos?
Hmm. I've heard of
Everybody,
it.
yeah, well, everybody's obsessed with the ending because the ending is so ambiguous, and the ending is just them.
Don't don't tell me,
Oh, sorry, but
because I want to watch it.
there's no exciting ending. It's just an
Yeah.
ending, right? It's just an ending. The scene just cuts, dark
Yeah.
fades to dark, right? And so, I always thought that David Chase was trying to do the exact same thing that Anora was trying to do, which is to leave an opening. Basically, the directors are saying, if you know these characters or if you feel like you know these characters, I want you to apply your imagination as to what happens afterwards, which is what I always do when I read a book, by the way.
Yeah.
When I read a book, I always imagine what happens to the characters after the book ends.
Hmm.
And I only do that when the book has been good enough at introducing and realizing the characters in a really fully formed way. It's actually one of my favorite things to do out of all the books that I read is to imagine what happens to the characters
That's
afterwards.
a that's a really really great point because like it for leaving it up to the audience and also
Yeah.
up to the film to argue how well it's done of portraying its characters, that you understand them that well, that you don't, or you can answer those questions yourself for yourself because it's your relationship to the movie. The only problem with that is that people are stupid. So people often have what is objectively the wrong interpretation, which is obviously is not supposed to be right, but it's just I sorry, I'm worked up because I just rewatched The End of Death Note, which is about a serial killer, and
Yeah.
some people argue that it glorifies him,
Hmm.
the serial killer, but and that's a gray area. Anyways, people can be stupid. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. So to sum up, it sounds like what we really liked about the movie. I mean, I just want to sort of give an overview before I moved on to some of my issues with the movie. But it sounded like what we really liked about the movie was that it was very entertaining and we thought the characters were beautifully realized, although we weren't that invested in it. Like we weren't that invested in the characters or in the outcomes, so to speak. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Is that a
Yeah.
good way to describe it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just thinking I wanted to say one more thing about Mikey Madison.
Yeah.
But you can finish your thought.
No, 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 that was my thought. Oh, I have one more thing that I liked about the movie, which is I thought that the cinematography was gorgeous. And so,
Hmm.
in particular, they were really, really good at doing, I don't know what the term is in your filmmaker lingo, but it's when they do these close-up intimate shots and then they pull out and frame the shots so that it looks very like incredibly cinematic and gorgeous, you know. So they especially, I
Yeah.
especially noticed this. I noticed this so many times, this sort of zoom in shot and then pull in to show the this incredible framing. And I noticed it most when they were walking to that restaurant when they were looking for Yvonne and she was
Yeah.
complaining about how cold it was and they were all talking about it. They were like, no, we're not going to drive there, we're gonna we're gonna walk there, and this is a lot longer than 10 minutes, and she was like bitching at this. And so when they were walking and along the boardwalk, there are those scenes, you know, where she's complaining about how cold it is, and then he gives her the scarf and blah blah blah. But then the camera pulls back, and you often see the four of them walking along the boardwalk against this really, really gorgeous winter sky. And
Yeah.
so I guess I'm glad. Overall, I expected the movie to be a lot grittier and more disgusting, like
Mm,
seamier than because it is a movie where the themes are about this dark underbelly of society that people like you and me don't have access to or see. Do you know what I mean? And
yeah.
so when you have a movie about those themes, you can often, like a director like David Fincher goes hard on those themes where he makes everything look really disgusting and really seedy and really run down, you know? But Anora was not like that. Things looked really bright and garish and cheap and artificial at times, but then you had these moments, and I think the cinematography really did a really good job of this. You had these moments of beauty, like you had these moments
Yeah.
of beauty, both in the characters. Like you could see how I don't think that Mikey Madison is particularly beautiful, but she could seem beautiful by her expressions because of the way that she was framed and the way that she acted. So those are the main things that I liked about the movie. So what were you gonna say?
Yeah. Well, that's a great point about um not indulging in the de depravity or the
Yes,
darker elements. Like I think in a lot of movies people just latch on to that and like, wow, it's so cool that they did that. Like, they're
yes.
saying something huge when they're really it's not. They're just doing that and that's all they're doing.
Yes,
When
actually, can I say one thing about that,
yeah,
about the
yeah.
depravity piece, which is a movie. I was really worried that this movie was going to feel like the movie Kids, which is, this movie that was, I think it was in the 1990s. It was directed by Larry Clark. It was written by Harmony Korine, and it's about these very, very young teenagers in New York. And it's a day in the life of the plot line is about this like young 14-year-old kid who goes around and tries to deflower as many virgins as possible. And then and it turns out one of the girls that he had sex with finds out that she's HIV positive, and it turns out that he's the one who's spreading it by, preying on all of these virgins. And so it shows these young kids completely out of control, doing drugs. Um, every single second of the day, they're doing drugs and committing crimes. And people said that the film set was actually like that too. Like the film set, like the kids were completely out of control and crazy. And so some of the critics hailed that movie as, oh, this is an astonishing feat of truth and honesty and courage and blah, blah, blah. And others were like, this is the most depressing apocalyptic view of young people that you could possibly imagine. Kind of
Yeah.
like the commentary that surrounded Euphoria, you know? So kids was, but when I saw kids, Dad and I saw in the theater, I came away from that movie so fucking depressed at how depraved it was and how it leaned so hard into the depravity. And I was so relieved that Anora did not lean that hard into the depravity. I was like, really,
Yeah.
I was glad that these characters were fighting for something, like, you know, that they were fighting for themselves. They were fighting for moments of beauty and happiness. Like I was glad because I needed that to latch onto. So that's my thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all I wanted to say about Mikey Madison was that I just her performance was incredible. And I don't think it's unwarranted that she's going for an Oscar. Um and I think she should absolutely, if she gets it, that's great. I think like she when I watched videos on this, she talked a lot about how they did a lot of improv for the scene. So she just wanted to get the accent and, the elements of like being a stripper like down so that she could just exist as that character in an improv environment. The club scenes, they said they shot for 30 minutes, just her going around talking to all those like background actors, and she
Yeah.
didn't know anything about those background actors, so she just had to go off of like what they were presenting, which I think is really admirable. And on top of the fact that she fully was a stripper. Like I don't know what she
Oh, I know.
I
Like
don't
that was
know
crazy.
I don't know like her background, obviously, if she's done this before, but like if she learned all that stuff for this movie, like holy shit. That's
I
like
know. The
huge,
pole
huge
dancing
props.
was insane. It was
Pole dancing,
crazy.
like the private dances, the lap dances, and then like the when she did that at home, performance for Yvonne.
Yes.
That's his name. Incredible. Like you just like you wouldn't believe that she was an actor playing a character. I fully bought into the idea that this is just like a person that they found,
Yes.
I think that that deserves so much praise, and
Yeah.
especially for
They did use a lot of actual strippers and sex sex workers for the extras.
right.
So she was like only the main characters were professional actors. Everybody else actually was from that world.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and again, it's a topic of sex work, and um, who knows right now how like that's kind of how what the public has kind of thrown at her for being in this movie.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's gonna like for the smallest things, like if as soon as like I mean, there's been a lot of YouTube drama too on this stuff. Like if people find out that like a creator's wife is like on OnlyFans, like they freak out because
Yeah.
like how could you do that? Which
Yeah.
is crazy.
There's so
Um,
much stigma around it.
yes. So
Yes.
again, it's great
And Sean
that
Baker is definitely trying to destigmatize it, no question.
yeah. And that's a great thing. So
Yeah.
and she's a part of that for sure.
Yeah. So that leads me to talk about what I transition to what we didn't like about the film. I have a couple issues, but my main issue is that um, tonally, I felt like the balance between comedy and drama um, wasn't always uh, precise, I guess. So I wasn't quite sure. I wasn't quite sure how funny the fixers were going to be. Like I just wasn't quite sure how funny it was supposed to. Later on, I realized that it was funny. The more Toros, the Armenian priest, got into his role and started like, worrying that line where he said, "I don't have Instagram. I'm an adult." That
Yeah.
was so funny. So I got the sense that they were leaning more and more into the comedy, but I was really uncertain about whether or not they were going to do that. So the first moment that I was starting to wonder about the balance between the tone thing, like about comedy and drama, was when what's his face? Taurus's brother, I forget his name, it's like Gorvin or something like that. He ran out after Yvonne when he was running out the door and he slipped on a patch of ice. And I was sitting, I was sitting there going, okay, is this the moment where I'm supposed to laugh?
Oh, it's so funny.
But then just a few moments later, you see Igor trying to restrain on Annie, and she's so upset, and he's restraining her in a way that, he thinks that it's for her own safety, but it's disturbing to watch her be manhandled like that.
Yeah.
Like it is just, and that's when you wonder, okay, is this going to be super violent? So the tonal clash I felt was a little bit jarring for me to get used to, and it actually, the thing that struck me, Eric, when I was watching this and like thinking, wait a second, is this supposed to be funny or is this going to be like get super dark? Like I wasn't, and how are they going to coexist? If it gets super dark, like, and then it goes back to funny, how is that going to coexist, in this movie? How is it going to be handled? So I had these questions in my mind about that. And then the reason, the thing that it made me think of was that movie with Jackie Chan, The Foreigner, where that movie is based on an incredibly tragic premise, which is his precarious position in society, and then he loses, his daughter who he loves so much. And, he's defeated at every turn when he tries to get answers about who caused the bombing that killed her. And then you get that scene towards the end where you see him in the elevator with the little Pekingese dog that he saved from the apartment before he like kicked everyone's asses. And so
Hmm.
that scene in the elevator, like I remember like when we watched that movie, we all like laughed out loud because it was like the scene of utter silence and then you see Jackie Chan holding this little Pekingese dog. And
Yeah.
so that to me, and I was like, what? Wait, what? And so that to me is sort of the same. I think that some movies, and I think some directors don't quite know how to get that balance exactly right. And I feel a little like, and maybe that's intentional. Like maybe you're supposed to be kept, maybe you are, as a viewer, you are supposed to be kept off balance. So did you feel that at all or no? Or did you just feel it was funny?
I mean, funny moments were funny to me. Again, it's like the spectating thing. I was just watching this unfold. So when you were talking about, I could see now how like jarring it is when you see like her being manhandled. Like where is this gonna go? Because I
Yes.
think that's a
Where's it gonna
fully
go?
legitimate reaction. But me as a man, I'm watching that like I'm like, oh, what's gonna happen? Like it's like a not excited, but expectant sort of like surprise. And that's when, funny things like when she breaks his nose or when like he slips on the thing, like though that's what like releases that sort of.
Yes.
And there was nothing that to me, I think what would have gotten in that territory of like confusion of how I'm supposed to feel is if she was like seriously injured, like if she was like if her nose got kicked, or like something where it was just like beyond recovery. Um but also like the whole context was like just the whole context being said that Yvonne just like ran away and we just don't know where he is right now. Like he was in the entire like first half and then he just like got out of there. So I think that in and of itself was enough for me to kind of feel like and like okay. But I will say in that sort of context, I did notice myself becoming just like a tad bit disinterested at sometimes, like
Yes.
or bored. Like
That's
not
exactly what I was gonna say. Yes.
not
Bored.
not super bored, like
No,
not
no,
like,
no,
oh,
I know.
I don't want to watch this anymore, but like just like a little like, all right, well maybe let's just get to the next thing.
I know.
Um
I felt
so
exactly the same way.
I think it was because of how real time it was. Like I was noticing that scene where, she's being where he runs away and that whole confrontation, like that lasts us that's a solid chunk of the movie. Like it's like
Yes.
huge.
Yeah.
So being in that for that long, I think is a bold choice, but it's just like I'm also feeling it. That's just kind of the risk with that.
Yeah. So you think I actually wrote that in my notes at that part. I said that this is getting a little bit boring or I want to move on to the next thing, but it wasn't a lot boring, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And what's so you think it might be a matter of pacing rather than the balance between tone.
The tone is like kind of naturally coming about through
Pacing.
pacing. But like, I don't know, it's a bunch of things. And also, I'd like to note that the director edited it himself.
Yes, I saw that. I noticed
So
that.
you know, I've had my experiences of, directors that want to stretch it out and just like, oh no, where we want to live in this moment, like, and listen, I'm sure he had great outside help or voices to like tell him, but since he was the editor, like he had the final say. So it's like he could just say no. So so I don't disagree with his choices. It's just like that's the risk. And some people obviously buy into that and they love it. And the tone is not an issue for or the pacing is not an issue. But
Yeah. I noticed that he also edited the film, and I'm so glad. You just did a glorious job of pointing out the pitfalls of a director getting too strong on the editing front, even though you may be biased on this point.
slightly, slightly.
But that's an absolute brilliant point. So then the next thing that I want to go to in terms of downsides is that Sarah said, Sarah in her review of the movie ultimately liked the movie very much, and she thought that Mikey Madison's performance was astonishing. She said, though, that her one issue is that she feels that Sean Baker is trying to destigmatize sex work and sex workers, but that he still does it from a distance. He doesn't really film or write about these characters as if he really, really knows them, like like he doesn't identify with them. He doesn't know them. Like ultimately, she said he's just a white upper middle class dude, writing a story and which is very sympathetic to the sex workers, but he still has many voyeuristic elements in terms of how he portrays them and how he shoots them and I actually agree with that 1000%. I do feel that distance.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a difference between sympathy and fully realize this is who I am. I know this
Yeah.
so well. And I think that shows up and actually results in a distance that I felt from the movie, like I find this interesting. I find this sympathetic. But ultimately, I don't know how authentic I find it in terms of like all the little details. He did a really great job on the human character aspect of it. So as I
Yeah.
said, like it's great that the caricature of the fixer and the mobsters and the oligarchs, they were all pushed past character into fully realized human beings. So he did well on the generalized human character part of it. And by the way, I don't fault him hugely for this because as you know, I've never succeeded in even writing page one of a screenplay. And I think that this is, for the most part, a really well written movie. I think the dialogue is really well written, and how much of that was improv, I don't know. But I do really feel that distance that
hmm
she mentions. So
That
what do
is
you
a
think about that?
that is no, that's a perfect way of putting it. Me addressing that would have just been like, oh well, he's a white guy. What is he? What
Yeah,
does
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah,
know?
yeah.
Like he keeps making movies about women, female-centered characters. Like it's like,
Yes.
uh, what does he know? Um, but he is a good filmmaker. So there's that line, and I think you can make movies that have really great stories and really great resolutions, messages, and have that distance still. Um, because if the story's that good, no one's really gonna care.
Yes.
But for movies that break the formula and like exist in a different type of space than just like a normal story or like with a beginning, middle, end, like this one, a lot of the times what makes up for that, um, I mean, despite it being technically super well made, obviously, is what the director or the filmmakers bring personally. Like just like what
Yes.
there's some
Exactly.
there's just this like intangible thing that they bring from their experiences and um from what they know about the subject that they're talking about or discussing that's what we kind of look for, and that's what is shown through those sort of more experimental things.
Yes, that makes me want to ask you, Eric, because I haven't seen this movie, but it makes me wonder what the experience of watching Dee Dee, is it Dee Dee?
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, like, whether that was different because there was less distance there. Like, you
Right.
felt less distance between the what the filmmaker brought to the subject matter.
Yes. That's a great example.
Okay, yeah,
Well, you know, it, I don't want to be unfair. Sorry, I don't want to be unfair to Sean Baker because like
yeah.
maybe he has, experienced this in his life. I will just say though, in his interviews, he
He's
comes
been a
off as a
Russian oligarch. He's been a sex worker. He's
well,
used a lot of sex workers. He's spent a lot of time
in
in Coney Island.
it's well in interviews he said that the movie started because he talked to the guy who played Toros, who he's worked with for years, and said they wanted to make a movie about the Russian community in New York or something like that. Like
Oh,
that's what the
okay.
inception of the movie was.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay. See that shows then. Yeah.
yeah, there's that, but also in the interviews, his vibes give off like, I just wanted to make this cool thing, and I'm really happy I made this cool thing with these people.
Yeah.
And I just, I see Mikey obviously like who's next to him in these interviews, I'm sure it's like she's with him 100%, but I just feel like I catch these little like, yeah, like you were, and I was a part of that. That was awesome, like and not like a this is real. Um, Dee Dee like is very it's super authentic. Obviously, like I think the fact that the director, I don't remember his name, but the he depicted Fremont, Asian American experience, and also just
Yes.
like that also had a more loose writing in terms of the story and like not loose, but like it was very good. But not every piece of dialogue was like serving this big story. It was just like kind of an atmosphere until like the kind of final scenes where it just kind of breaks you. So,
Yeah.
and that's because it was so real. And
Yeah.
the relationship with Dee Dee and his mom was like the main thing that was like the
So
emotional
real.
core of that story. And I'm sure, and the grandma in his
Yeah.
family. So I'm sure he that came from a lot of personal experience, and you could totally feel that. So
Yeah. It's interesting because it raises the question about how far directors and creators in general, like writers and directors, how far they should venture outside of their personal, like what they know and what they feel. And I think that those are really important questions because I think that directors obviously should be able to make films about like subject matter that's
yeah,
completely foreign and or outside of their experience. But
yeah,
if they're going to do it, then how are they going to do it in a way that's like deeply respectful, where you don't notice that distance and you don't notice that unfamiliarity? Like,
hmm,
obviously, science fiction is about things that, directors don't know. They're inventing these worlds entirely out of their own heads. But at the
yeah,
same time, they're populating those worlds with themes and people that are very familiar to them. Like, this is
yeah,
when you have a movie like Alien, and you have this whole cast of characters, and it's like, oh yeah, I knew a guy who acted like that Dick Soldier. You know what I mean? Like, I knew.
true,
So that's what I mean. I think that it raises a really important question about how you tell subject matter in a way that feels deeply, deeply lived in and personal to you, and
yeah,
also brings the audience in with you rather than makes the audience aware of your your distance from the subject.
yeah.
And I don't think that Sean Baker was entirely successful, by the way, with Anora. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was like a level where it worked,
Yes,
and
that's
that's
right.
totally acceptable. It's like it
Yes.
worked, and I going back to like the improv note, like I think that's a great choice. Like making, I'm sure like the actresses got a lot of like liberty in terms of being able to portray themselves, in a way that they thought serviced the story in that sort of personal way, but um, that's also not as like it doesn't feel as intentional. Like,
Yes.
and you maybe want it to be intentional sometimes. I hear a lot of stories about improv, and a lot of times it's like because they were so intentional, there was so much intention that something new came out of that,
Yes, yes,
instead of like
exactly.
out the gate, just like, yeah, you just go for it.
Yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah,
could
yeah.
work. Again, it could work. And it did, I think. But,
Yes,
you know,
overall it worked. Yes. So we can wrap this up actually in less time than we have. But anyway, but I will say, so I noticed that you gave it 4 stars on
yeah,
letterboxd, but you did not like it.
yes. Or I didn't give it a like.
You
That's a
didn't give it a
different.
like.
I will say, if people say, what did you think of the movie? I was like, I liked it. It was good, but I
You
won't
sound like
say,
dad.
I know. It's literally the same thing.
It's good. No,
Like,
it wasn't bad. It was good.
The like for me is just literally it's just like a selfish button. It's just a button for me to be selfish on. Like I usually will say that it's for like when I feel like a movie's personally resonated with me in some way, where it's like, and most of the time it's just because it's like it's fun, it's a good story, or it's like it's had this one thing that I actually like respected, or stuff like that. I don't know. It's not that deep, I feel like. And the 4 stars, any lower than that, and I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to what actually came out, you know. Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
four is the lowest I'll go for a movie that's just decently well made. It's just good. It's just a good, solid movie. I feel like I've explained it, sorry,
No, no,
too many
no. I
times.
don't. I'm actually asking this because I don't know how to rate this movie. I walked out of it thinking that I liked it more than I disliked it. And I was very moved by some of the performances, but I wasn't especially invested in the story or the outcomes or the characters. And I had moments of being feeling connected and rooting for the characters, but I was more disengaged, both by the pacing issue that we talked about earlier, when that scenes just went on too long. Um, for example, I thought that the whole courtship phase went on too long. I mean, it didn't, it actually, I mean, like, I know that's
Yeah,
crazy, but
I
it
I was
didn't make
noticing
any
how long it
sense.
went. Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
but I thought it was funny how long it was going. I thought that was like an element of the comedy, like how crazy they were getting and how much partying they were doing.
Yeah, well, the number of scenes where they showed them having sex and his completely inept sex,
Yeah,
like his completely inept, immature approach to sex.
yeah,
I was just like, I really have gotten that joke already, and I don't really need, like,
yeah,
she could have given him that advice about, taking his time. She could have
yeah,
given that like 10 minutes earlier, as far as I was concerned.
yeah. True. Something I totally forgot to say earlier when I was talking about Mikey Madison, was how subtle she was able to convey her relationship to her identity when it came to like her talking about being Russian or knowing Russian, and
Oh,
like
yes.
her relationship to that, I thought was super. That is something that was more personally resonant for me. Like when she's asked to speak Russian and she's like I don't speak, and it's not that good,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she clearly know, like, you're not sure if she's fluent in it or if she only knows a little bit, but then you find out she is super fluent in it, but she talks in a very like strict, kind of like American accent. um and the fact that that was addressed later when the mom is grilling her, um and telling her Russian is terrible. It's like it makes that more heart shattering. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly what she's fearful of, and
Yeah.
what she was like.
Not
She's
being
come.
an imposter.
Yes, yes.
Yes, or like being caught between two worlds. Yes.
Exactly. She was coming out of her shell. She was trying to talk to Yvonne in like in Russian and like be casual about it.
Yeah.
And she was slowly kind of getting to that place, which is part of the reason why she felt comfortable with him, was because he kind of invited that a little bit. He was a charming, guy who like was nice enough.
Yeah.
Um,
In the
and
beginning.
yeah, and then that was just completely shattered by like, your Russian fucking sucks and we're gonna fucking sue you to fucking hell, like
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
try
yeah,
and
yeah,
pursue this.
yeah. Yeah, we're
So
gonna destroy you and your family and everything that you. Yes. Yeah.
yeah. And then, I was looking, this is kind of random, but like I was looking on letterboxd, there were two other movies that were kind of similar, or that this reminded me of, that I also rated the exact same, which were Promising Young Woman and um Worst Person in the World. I just watched Worst Person in the
Yeah,
World
I
on
saw that.
Saturday. Um and all of the movies are about, have a female protagonist who kind of goes through some shit. um and Worst Person in the World, it's kind of like dumbed down to like the most basic like stuff. It's just kind of about cheating. Um and but like they all communicate a really real aspect of these characters, and what they go through, that's like admirable, but not necessarily like a movie like I would like and like want to go watch with some
Yeah, yeah,
friends.
yeah. Again.
It's
Yeah.
more like a, yeah, that was real. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I get it. All right. I really enjoyed talking with you. It's always about this movie. It's always kind of a delight when you express things that I'm trying to put into words. You get there first and you tell me how I'm feeling about something, which when I didn't know that I was feeling it.
Well, that's funny
So,
because I feel like you do the exact same thing. That's crazy. It's almost
oh
like
my gosh,
these discussions make us learn more. I mean, I always come,
we must be psychically aligned.
yeah, I always come into these discussions like I have nothing to say. Yeah, I don't know how I felt about the movie. Obviously it helps when I like watch stuff. Like I will watch things. Um, and the little tidbits and stuff is actually not at all what I end up, caring about at all. It's what like the deeper themes that are in the movie, and you always like have the exact right questions or the exact right way to sum things up that like make me that open up a lot of other doors, which I really
Oh,
appreciate.
thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's really good to be back after our break, whatever
There's a,
that
what do you
was.
mean break? It's just we're a monthly show now. That's why I made the post because I was like, oh fuck, people are gonna forget about us. Like people are
People
not
don't know about.
people are
How
waiting
can
on
they
Mom and Eric. Like
how
it's
can they forget about us if they don't
gonna get
know
out of the
about us?
zeitgeist.
Except for the Deadpool and Wolverine episode. I think we've gotten like
Dude, it's like 500 or 450 episode or views or something.
I know
I
it's
don't know.
crazy. I saw
Yeah.
that. It's crazy. But anyway, it was great talking to you. And until next time, I'm actually excited because there's a whole bunch of Oscar bait coming out. So, we could see Conclave, we can see something. I was
Oh, Brooke just
actually
went to see that.
I was actually interested because the previews for Anora, it felt like it was all the big independent movie studio powerhouses all jockeying for space. So it was A24, it was Neon, and it was Fox
Yeah.
Searchlight, and
Yeah.
nobody else.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this because I actually follow the ups and downs and fortunes of the movie studios. And in the old days, it would have been Miramax, in that mix before Harvey Weinstein's downfall. I
Yeah.
forget. I feel like there's another one that would have been in the mix, but nowadays it's Neon A24 and it's Fox Searchlight. Oh, it would have been Sony too. Sony Pictures used to have like a big independent sort of artsy. Anti-Serena calls them critically acclaimed movie. So anyway, this was fun. And we'll talk about what our next movie will be, but episode 24 is in the books, and I love you a ton, Eric.
Love you too. Thank you.